Good morning, good afternoon, HubSpot Nation, LinkedIn friends. Welcome to part 2 of our in-depth journey, I think is the right word, figuring out this HubSpot Shopify integration as it sunsets, still scheduled for the middle of May. And we want to help get more understanding out there. Thanks so much for joining us, Stefan.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
We had a great conversation last time about really just everybody, you want to go in, you want to start plugging stuff in, you want to start creating properties, you want to just say, oh, I see this over here, let's get it over here, let's build out a whole integration, right? We haven't even figured out what each system is supposed to be doing, right? So go back and watch part 1 if you have any trouble saying HubSpot is for this and Shopify is for this. Because if you can't have that conversation, you can't build a good integration. Bottom line, right? So it might help to listen to this conversation today to help you with that understanding, because deals versus orders is a huge change in terms of the HubSpot ecosystem, how we manage revenue, how we manage, customer transactional, understanding and historical views. We've only had deals for the longest time. And now integrations like Shopify were actually the first ones to represent orders and order object in HubSpot. And a big challenge for this change, because I just said a bunch of stuff about revenue, historical understanding of customers, transactional understanding, activity, what happens after the sale. All of that has been happening in deals. And with this new integration, you've got to involve orders. Tell me from what you're seeing, like why that's such a big deal and like much more impactful than most people might think.
Yeah, I think it's a huge change and it's a positive change, first of all. I think another object that I might want to put there in the conversation is cards, and I'll explain the differences between a cart and a deal as well, and the order. But maybe at the beginning, I just want to explain how I see those three objects, especially deals and orders and cards. How do they all work together? So for me, orders is all about delivery. So orders is everything after a deal becomes closed won, it should become an order, and then it goes to being delivered, shipped, and so on, right? And everything that business needs. And that applies both to manufacturing, wholesalers, retailers, B2B, B2C, all of them. But then we need to definitely talk about the cart object in the mix altogether, because for me, cards are everything that is gonna, majority is gonna be B2C side of things. So when somebody on Shopify basically, let's say, makes that, checkout, but in the end does not check out, so it becomes an abandoned checkout, that's for me a cart. But when it gets completed, then it should become an order. So in my opinion, order is delivery, everything monetary until closed won is deals or cards, depending on B2C or B2B side of things and how the setup of HubSpot should be working. The only time they really interfere with each other is if the order is not delivered, not shipped and closed, lost during the process of delivery or shipping. Then we should be updating with a workflow that the deal is closed, lost because of that reason, being undelivered or unshipped and things like that. So that's the only time that it should be coming back. That's how I see the structure. That's why I think the changes, and that's where I think the businesses should use it like that, because also orders, especially in bigger e-commerce brands that also using ERP systems, orders should be the place that integrates with the ERP. No deals, everything should be managed in the CRM on the side of deals. And usually when we work with wholesalers, we always tell them, every single mention of a wholesale deal needs to go in a deal side of things. When it gets to closed won, then we would create an order. Then we would make that order, whether that's in an ERP system. We also work with a couple of installers, so like field management system and so on. But for us, it's very, very strict. everything sales wise is in the deals until closed one, then it goes into orders or in a custom object if that's needed. But we have orders now, so this is great kind of for the e-commerce side of things. That's the structure that I see from my data experience. There's the data model that I would build for everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because it's very easy to, be contained into what we inside the HubSpot container, if you will. Like, we can't see what's happening on outside. Orders exists in certainly every system that manages revenue and delivery, right? Even some CRMs, start to include it just because it's separate. And we'll get to what the place of deals is in this world that we're talking about. But one of the reasons I like to separate is, like, it's real data. Like, it's not like so much of sales and marketing and CRMs and all these systems. And the reasons it can be hard to integrate systems is because there's a bunch of hopeful data in CRMs and in deal pipelines and in accountants. They don't like hopeful data. They sure as hell don't want to be taxed on hopeful data, right? So drawing this line, you often see, even though they don't always hold to it, like the ERP is like, it's not any kind of opportunities or predicted things that will happen. This is real transactions that have happened that have this kind of monetary impact on the organization, that have this kind of inventory impact, these sorts of things. So in that world, so we have a system, and the one thing I wanted to add is, like, yes, B2C, but we're also seeing B2B. This happen a lot. And a common use case, especially in manufacturing, is when you offer these customers the opportunity to self-serve online. They often want situations like, well, I just can't complete the sale without a quote, right? It's a part of our process. So can you just give me a button that says print quote, right? And so there's still these cart like use cases, right? That it serves that use case very well. But when we have these things interacting, we've got carts, orders. What is deals doing in this world?
For me, I would say deals is B2B side of things, and that's the relationship building. So again, another differentiation maybe between orders and carts and deals. I would say deals and carts are relationships, orders are the delivery and shipping again. Yes, that's sometimes intertwined because you want to get repeat customers. So of course, when an order is delivered, you need to kind of bring it back into an area, but I would say more contact company in order to try to nurture them again, build those relationships and so on. But I don't want to go out there and complicate it. I think everybody's very much confused with all of these objects that now all of a sudden, with this integration especially, and orders, in my opinion, in the whole lifespan of HubSpot is quite new object, right? Let's face it, it is maybe a year old, even something around that. And I would say, keep it simple. B2C side of things, cards, B2B deals, delivery orders, and keep it simple at the beginning. Things can get more complicated with time, of course, because a cart can also be a B2B abandoned checkout by one of your side of things. But then how do you deal with all of that together? But deals should stay and always will be more relationships than any of the other object side of things. We are also big advocates. I don't like when somebody has in a deal stage, and I'll put this up for discussion, but quote send for me is not a stage. That's an activity, right? That's a task that needs to be managed in quotes. We know the quote status and so on. Quote signed, also not. Follow up, enrolled in a sequence. So all sorts of all of these things. Deal stages should not ever be activities. There's other areas in the CRM where you can use those activities. And I think it should remain the same in orders and in objects, in cards as well. It should be straightforward, simple stages that you're pulling through that order, deal, or a cart all together, and everything else needs to be managed in activities, meetings, notes, calls, tasks, and so on. So that's where we kind of see that differentiation. But I would say, again, I'm going to kind of repeat it is, for anybody listening to this, you want to use this integration, doesn't know where to start small. Don't think, this is a kind of huge beast. Get it implemented in a right way, and starts that cards are B2C, deals are B2B, orders are delivery and shipping, and that's it.
So how are we thinking about that? Let's say we have a great CRM setup. It does happen, people, I promise. And everything's been in deals, and there's clear distinction between B2B deals and B2C deals. Even when there's carts, let's say that was clean, right? We've got different e-commerce pipelines, right? How are we transferring data and managing that? Like, we've got to either like cut it off and then switch to doing it in orders. How do you help people think through that in terms of, okay, well, now my revenue is in two separate places and I feel like I need to create a deal to mirror the order? How do you respond to that, like, inevitable request?
I mean, look, not an easy response. Let's put it like that. We do we get a lot of business through data migration to HubSpot, for example, and they're always painful. There's my you can't maybe see it now because I have a new haircut, but my receding hairline is due to the data migrations, and migrating the data within the CRM. If everything is in HubSpot, it's still going to be difficult, and trying to move it out. I would say there has to be a clean cutoff point, and you have to agree and plan. Every single migration, the key to a successful migration is planning. It's not technically a technical ability, because you can plan, you can kind of assume all of that. It's not the server speed of APIs, because you can also assume that and do the math on that side of things. It's all about good planning and how are you going to move the data around. But moving the data around, for us at least, we do this day in and day out. It's quite simple, because you can extract all of those deals based on a certain segment and basically put them into cards, right? Not a problem. The bigger problem comes reporting and workflows, because you will have probably so many workflows to go through to change that they are now working off cards rather than deals, that you'll give up probably on that side of things. So what we always kind of do, and maybe a direct tip, is you have to replicate the workflow exactly like it was for deals to cards, and then basically turn this one off, turn this one on, change the parameters, and then put it back on, right? So there will be downtime, and in migration there is always a downtime. It's not a question that is there a downtime going to be. It is going to be there. You just have to cut it down to the least amount of hours or days to do all of that. Reporting is another beast in its own, right? When we fix all of the workflows, reporting can maybe wait a little bit, let's say a couple of days, right? Until somebody checks their Monday or Friday or midweek report to see how they did in the last week, or how are they doing. But again, I don't like it. I don't like that we now have to, use 3 objects, while everything previously was just, split by pipeline, given the stages, what are the open deals, and we had very good analytics. So you have to rebuild all of these reports to now work off all of these, different objects altogether. So it does become very tricky. And then you have to build additional reports where you really have to match the data between orders and deals, and the orders and cards. Because let's face it, if a certain order, coming back to my example, what is the only example that orders should impact deals and cards is when it gets closed lost because of undelivered or not in stock or any of those reasons. Coming back to the deal, you need to check that constantly. You need to see your workflows are working. You need to see that, when the order becomes closed lost or undelivered or anything of that we are updating that deal. So in reality it's a process. It's a full process. But if you go through that process directly, you should have one dashboard and a report or set of reports that is going to be for your delivery/shipping team, that is going to just based on orders. You should have for your B2B team based on deals, and your for B2C team or your e-commerce managers and so on based on cards. And management should have a look overview of all of them. But then again, they should be just having the top line view. I mean, we can go into reporting and data analytics in a completely, another hour conversation. But I would say, a process. It's such a process, like moving all of the data around. And as I said, I think I said it in the last session. We try to do it for ourselves. Our website is on Shopify, and we sometimes receive an order. We don't push it that much. We just made it. We're trying to do this like service selling as a product. And when I clicked on migrate workflows, I have like 13 workflows built in. 2 of them migrated successfully. I had to do all of them 11 manually, right? So yeah, a bit clunky, if I can be honest, but possible with proper planning. That's kind of my advice.
That's such a key, right? Because at the end of the day, everybody wants all their data, like this unified view of the customer and this unified views of the business. They want these things. And what we're telling you now is it's going to be easier. There's a path now. There wasn't a path before in a lot of these cases. It just requires that proper planning and process, like you say, that it's going to be clunky right now. It's getting better because and that's where you're in a tough spot. Like there's some clunkiness you're just going to have to deal with if you have to migrate, which you do right now. Because we are seeing movement. And this is where if you're just an individual and all you care about is a Shopify integration and you don't do quotes and you don't necessarily care about all the other things that are happening in HubSpot, like we're seeing, this revenue reporting shift as cash flow comes in, CPQ and billing management, they know how clunky it is. They're more familiar than anybody else in some cases. And we're seeing like line item specific revenue reporting starting to show up. We're seeing more order specific. This is why right now, all we can do is really get clear on what we want, as a part of our process, the business's process, not the systems deciding for us. What should like the role of these objects be based on our process? Because at the end of the day, there are lots of scenarios where I need to see the B2C data right next to the B2B data. There's so many people that are like, should be the quickest path towards revenue expansion for the business. And they have such a hard time, bridging that gap because all these systems have had these gaps, right? So knowing that there's going to be others out there that have 12, maybe a lot more workflows, and they're going to see only 2 or 10% of them, come over. How do you, what's the step there when they run into that?
Hire experts. I'm selling our services now. No, jokes aside, but yeah, I think
it's like 50% joking. Like it's actually pretty serious.
50%. Yeah.
You guys can't. There's no way you can keep up with this. And there's 10 ways to do just about everything in HubSpot. Why we're here right now is it doesn't take us all 10 tries, right? We figured out the 1 or 2 ways to get to where you want to go. But that's also why we're clearly not just selling, because we're here educating on this process. And it's just impossible for anybody to keep up on their own, right? So I'd say that's a fair, like if you don't live, like eat, sleep, breathe HubSpot and Shopify, like which you shouldn't, you eat, sleep, breathe your business, right? Like know that this is important enough and the outcomes will be, good enough and at the very least, but great. Like you're going to get visibility that you've always wanted and never thought you could have, like this dreamy visibility stuff here, folks. It comes with expertise of people have done it. So that's definitely, I think that's a fair piece of advice, right? It doesn't have to be us. There's lots of people out there. Just know that a lot of this stuff is brand new to HubSpot. Most of it's brand new when we talk about orders, carts, a lot of the revenue reporting, right? So I think resourcing yourself, and don't think that, when you see 10% of your workflows go over, don't think it's all on you. Like it's not going to work out if you put it all on yourself. It's just not, right?
I agree. I fully agree, and I think HubSpot is moving as a CRM in general to this one-click and you've done something, I think that's impossible in that way. I mean, every business is unique because of one thing, their processes, and all of those processes, dictate how the CRM is going to look like. And I'm big and I always say this to my team is, you need to understand the process. You need to understand the product that they're selling. You need to understand the people. You need to understand how salespeople are working in the CRM. We can't just be technical, integrators, data migrators, data analytics people, workflows builders, any of these. We can't just be technical. We have to understand the process. We have to see, and we also have to be up to date with everything that's going on in the system, because you can assume that if you do a good job now, if transiting it in the proper object, that you know what the future is going to look like. Because let's face it, I think all of us that, when HubSpot started introducing all of these number of changes, we kind of knew where certain things were going, and we knew where all of this is gonna lead into. The customer doesn't see that, because the customer is not, I spend 7 hours a day in HubSpot altogether, whether that's ours, whether that's our clients, and things like that. My team even more, and we kind of know where it's going. So I would say is, changes are normal, and the biggest, I think, problem, and this is maybe going up, maybe outside of a little bit e-commerce, but in all the businesses, is that they think that a CRM implementation is just the subscription cost of a service, or of that software, whether that's HubSpot or any other, right? That's such a terrible thought, because what you really need to think about is implementation, training time, experts bringing on board, and so on. I mean, the amount I just spoke to you before this about it. We are selling quite a lot these days consultations. So it's like, for a certain amount of money, I don't want to sell it out now and on the publicly, but for a certain amount of money, you get an hour consultation, and then you can buy as many hours as you want. But people are struggling really with the system setup, and just like get their head around it, because they previously used a legacy system or not a very developed system, not so many functionalities. They bought HubSpot, but they have no idea how to set it up. Some of them even they want to do it themselves, especially like some more technically led, management team, and they have chief operating officers and things like that. So they want to do it themselves, but it's a big confusion. And the big thing that in those consultations that all our clients are asking us is, they're saying, but I'm not sure what's the right way. And that's the big thing. And then you have to persuade them that you kind of are the expert in the field, knowing the system and where it's going to lead, and that you're not giving them the advice today that they'll have to change something in 6 months that is going to cost them a couple of $1,000s, right? And you don't want to do that. I think there's a lot of course, agencies out there and consulting partners that want to do that. They want to kind of make a mistake or not do a full job in order to try to build it again. We are not like that. We want to have that customer happy and a good review, because that means to us much more as a small company growing. So coming back to where we kind of spoke about, carts and deals and orders, it's all about the setup. It's all about, map out your flow, map out the flow chart of how the business is going, and try to mimic it directly into the CRM. I think that's where success is going to be seen.
Yeah, oh man, such an interesting, I'm right there with you, obviously, in terms of that's why you invest in a system like HubSpot, is that, and that's why we're so, I'm really excited about these changes, because a lot of systems aren't set up. They require systems administration like Teams, right? The whole Salesforce side of the world, right, is meant to just accept that it's a complicated system, that you need a full staff of people to run it, and it's never going to be easy. So just be ready, just have the break fix ready, right? And we can get you to a place where none of that is required. It's just the setup. Like it's the easiest to use system once it's set up, not before that, right? And that's even at free level. We got all these objects. If you don't understand your data model, which most people don't, it's complex. Like there's no like push button. It gets confusing really quickly, and that's where that's why we're taking a beat for this conversation, right? It can be simplified. Deals versus orders, for me, is because whether it's deals, whether it's opportunities, whatever you want to call it, it's built to manage towards closed won. And for no other, like that's the primary reason for this object, right? So when we're talking about carts and orders, right? Carts is like, imagine this hands-off, like everybody, a lot of businesses, even in B2B, have these situations where there's small consumables or there's things that the client is bought into, but the sales guy has to do the same kind of quoting process as it is like the $100,000 piece of equipment. And they're like, we are losing money every time I have to quote this, right? That's what this object's for. And that's where, if that's the case, where sales is like, yeah, I want it to be hands-off. Like it helps my relationship if it is hands-off, right? So in those moments, that's where a cart, right? Which says in the word, like it's a hands-off online buying experience, right? Probably don't have deals. And that's why you want the separation, right? So for me, it comes down to if there is a sale to be managed, or if there's a relationship to be managed to get to closed won, then that's a deal, right? Or it needs to happen inside of deals. That's what deals are built for. All this other stuff we've been doing in deals because we haven't had any other objects to do it in, right? All this delivery stuff, this post-sales stuff that gets added in, that's the stuff that moves out. So is it fair to say, and this is where, like, when you think about the business model as a whole, and we decide that that's what deals are for and orders are for delivery, every deal that closed won, that you win, will have an order. Yes? Right?
Yes, certainly, yes.
But not every order will have a deal.
Yeah, correct.
I want it to be that simple for people. Like, but as I say it, I know how massive of a shift in how you use HubSpot is, right? Where you've been going to the deal board to just understand everything you need to understand. And now you got to shift. You just can't get the picture that you've been wanting, but understand that every other system that manages post-sales and revenue in this way uses an order object, like, to do this, right? So that's where there's tons of help ready to help you out there, right? To manage it this way. And if you can get yourself, it's simple to like break it up like that, but then what does your process need to look like to actually treat it like that? And can you hold yourself accountable to say, okay, if I understand that not every order is going to have a deal because we've decided deals are for this, I should not even consider creating a closed won deal to represent whatever happened in the order, right? Which is the gut reaction that most have, because that's how we've created revenue visibility in HubSpot, has been through deals, right? Are there any situations, I don't want to pull the rug out either. Like, how do you create that bridge? Let's say somebody's like, this is where all my revenue visibility is. It seems so easy. Like, we don't have a ton of hands-off orders. We just have a few. Can I just represent them as deals for the time being?
Oof, how do we deal with that? Good question. We had a couple of examples of that side of things. Education is so massive, and showing them what all of this means and what the future is going to look like and so on. I think you're absolutely right. The orders are not going to mirror deals, and that's a fact, because if they were mirroring deals, then we would put closed won deal probability 1, and then we would have it shipped and delivered, and then the end also as one altogether, which a lot of customers still do have, or they have a separate pipeline, delivery pipeline in the deal, where a workflow automatically creates that closed won deal from the sales pipeline into the delivery, which takes a completely new process. I mean, there's a ton of different customizations throughout different customers, and don't only forget that this is not only for e-commerce, this big change, deals vs orders. It's also for the service-based businesses that are providing the servicing and needing to deliver the service in order to really get the, I don't know, the 70% of the payment on the 30% deposit, right? So it is a big educational piece to see why we need to do that. But it's much easier when somebody has an ERP, because then we just do order to ERP sync. Very, very simple. We don't touch deals at all from that side of things. And I think, I know that you're working quite a lot with manufacturing businesses and so on. And I think the biggest thing for us would be to tell those businesses everything sales to closed won does not touch the ERP. ERP should be touched when the deal is closed won and when the order is created. So as far as through an API or native integration, doesn't matter. So it creates that order also in the ERP. And then what we are doing with those integrations is just updating the status from the ERP into the CRM, because that's relevant for marketing purposes, sales purposes, and so on. And that's how we structure every single ERP integration that we've ever done. Don't touch the deals when it comes to closed won. Then we start touching the ERP, but just updating the status of that information and maybe some other tracking number or things like that. I know a lot of customers want to send via email marketing. They want to send the tracking number via HubSpot, right? So we just need to push that back from the ERP or the shipping provider. So not easy, but much easier if you have some other systems. If you're a bigger business, for smaller businesses, it's much difficult to persuade them. This change that is going to cost you, I don't know, $2,000 in our services is going to be worth it in the long run. But that's also like in selling CRM. We can again go through another hour conversations like, why do you need to pay to HubSpot $50,000 a year? Or some crazy subscription for your 10 team members and things like that. That's a lot of conversations need to kind of go in there to see them, the educational piece and so on. But I would say,
because you want to grow by $10 million.
Yeah,
sure. That's why you're going to pay $50,000.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really, pricing is another story. Some of our enterprise level customers, I can tell you how much they're paying to HubSpot, and that's a lot.
Yeah, and that's where we talk about these systems. There are these setups where they pay what they need to pay because they understand the impact of data visibility, actionability by teams, not forcing people to, log into all these different systems when a customer calls in and they got to let me dig into my ERP, to find that tracking number for you. On our product update show today, one of the product updates, it was for Ask Breeze. It talked about as a way to help with obfuscated data. And that caused some conversation, but basically that says so much of the data that we've heard about is because it's buried in these post-sale systems, but customers need to know it. And customer teams have been the bridge, right? Where they're logging into systems, they're calling other departments. You'd be amazed at how often that happens and how commonplace it feels, to the point where they don't even ask to improve it, right? It's I thought that's just how we had to do it, right? I'm happy to answer the call, except when I'm not there to answer the call and give you that tracking number, right? Then I got to get up from my office and then go. People have done a magnificent job of serving customers without this data, present. But that's one of the whole reasons, our customer facing teams, we expect so much of them. One of the biggest things I've seen about orders, about creating this space, closed won after closed won, right? You can now have a non-sales team managing an object in HubSpot. So order management, customer success, however you want to play it, having this separation of teams that can own their sets of data, without worrying about what are we going to name it, because now it's going to show up on the salesperson screen and we don't want to confuse, we don't want to get in their way. We literally go through conversations like that, and rightfully so, because we've got these people trying to use the CRM. We've chosen, the priority is to sell stuff. We don't want to create these clunky views that are super confusing. And when you separate this stuff out, it just gets so much easier to manage across teams, while also giving that sales team, when they tell you very plainly and very common sensibly that I would love to see my order history, I would love to see the customer's order history in the deal on their contact record, right? When it comes up, right? And that's where now we have the ability in HubSpot, if we get the data there, to create that visibility.
I fully agree. Sorry if I'm jumping in, but I think another topic here is we can also remove them. And with the new HubSpot per user pricing, this is maybe not a good advice for HubSpot, but I think also in a way for some customers, this is gonna still allow the visibility in the CRM and in the ERP. So you don't have to mix those two users and going and tampering with data, and if the permissions are not set, messing something up and things like that. So the customer services might still want to just stay in the ERP and not even touch the CRM, while sales is still in the CRM but has the visibility of the customer service, and they don't have to log into two different systems. They are basically all separate, owning their own two systems, an ERP or a CRM or an e-commerce site, but still everybody has the visibility of what's going on in business. And that's what I think, I've been always a big advocate in saying CRM brings the democracy of data. That was always my saying, and that's my kind of classic sales page: democracy of data, because everybody can see it, everybody has the ability to act on it, and it's reportable, it's there, you can use it for workflows and so on. But again, coming back to this structure, e-commerce to CRM to ERP, it's always the middle system that is the data lake. It is always the middle system that should be holding all the data. Because let's face it, your e-commerce site on Shopify, for example, it's not going to hold your email history. Neither should that be in your ERP, because if that's only and solely for delivery. Okay, a lot of ERP systems, especially the bigger ones, have the CRM functionality. Not a very good one. HubSpot is much better on that side of things, but it's more for the delivery side of things. And I think especially in majority of industries, if you talk about ERPs, they will talk about delivery, they will talk about manufacturing, they will talk about retail, wholesale side of things, planning, stock side of stock area, they will talk about capacity planning and so on. CRM should just stay for sales, marketing, and that bit of operations until it gets passed on to the delivery side of things. But it's still the CRM is that key piece, at least for me, where all data should be. Build those custom properties, no problem. Restrict people to seeing them. Tell them not to use it if you're not an enterprise. You can't, remove the permission side of things on who can see it and who can touch it. Not a problem. But then again, CRMs also have reporting side of things. So push that data from the ERP back into the CRM. Report from it. They're more user-friendly. HubSpot is, in my opinion, one of the most user-friendly systems that I've ever seen, and I think I used maybe 50 plus more that I like in the CRM, e-com, ERP area. Push all of that data back in, and that's where the power is going to come. That democracy of data, all in one place. I'm not going to say it, but I'll say it: single source of truth. It's such a cliche these days, but it
Right.
takes time, but it's possible. In my opinion, it's possible. If you're aware on data integrations and how systems should coincide with each other, it's definitely possible.
Yeah. And that's like the visibility. Again, we come back to, and we went into this last show, like HubSpot's role, if you can expand it to like communication management. And no matter who's involved, leaders always want this visibility of what could be and what is. And the closer they are together, they get to their forecast, they get to all these things where what could be is never successfully executed inside of an ERP or an e-commerce. Like they're literally built for the transaction and management of things, right? E-commerce obviously can give you, what is happening metrics in terms of like, e-com visits, but that falls apart very quickly if you do anything else outside of the store, right? When the customers can call in and place an order, right? Which happens a lot, right? So if you can get HubSpot to that place where it's like, okay, This is communication central, which means whether it's a deal, whether it's a cart, whether it's an order, anybody serving customers or anybody communicating with customers, prospects, supply chain, even, right? It's getting more refreshing to have less of a debate about whether supply chain emails should be right next to your sales emails. It's like, yeah, if that lead time changes from 2 months to 4 months, sales guys want to know immediately, and they don't want to have to call somebody in procurement to figure that out, right? So that's all of this is why the build part, the integration, it's the easy part. Like 95% of this journey is the process, like mapping your process, figuring out where the data needs to go. And you don't need to overthink it. Like if you can simplify it, say, this is the role of deals, this is the role of carts, this is the role of orders. The data modeling and the process mapping gets so much easier, right? This is a passionate topic. Yeah. Well, it's a passionate topic for sure, because the beautiful thing and the painful thing at the same time, the way that HubSpot is choosing to solve for this, well, there's clunkiness right now, but the way that the data model is always centered around the human being that you have to build trust with and build a relationship with and communicate with, that's why the way they build it out is always with that at the center, which means if we can get customer teams a space to work inside of HubSpot, everybody wins. Like the customer team wins, which means the customers win, which means the business wins, right? So passionate topic, and we'll be here next time because there's a lot. We're halfway through this journey, and we talked a little bit about reporting and dashboarding, but we're saving that for the end, because if you don't do any of this other stuff we're talking about, like, good luck with dashboards. Next time, we're going to talk about native versus custom, and try as they might. HubSpot does their best to create native apps. What we're talking about now is the data sync version of the Shopify integration is what they want people to be using. It is more robust compared to the last time. But businesses are going to business. They need custom stuff, and we're going to walk you through kind of how to navigate that conversation to even understand, is native viable? If not, why not? Because there's definitely a bunch of people out there that'll take your money to build all the custom integrations you've ever heard of in your life, right? And then they will charge you monthly to help upkeep that at the same time. But that doesn't mean we always get to move forward for free just because there's a native app available in the app marketplace. So I appreciate you so much, Stefan, for taking some time to help educate on this. And until next time, my friend.
Yeah, no worries, Chris. I enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting me.
All right. Thanks so much.